So Yeon had never believed in fate. At 28 years old, she was accustomed to relying only on herself, building her career through hard work and not allowing emotions to control her life. Working at a large logistics company required constant composure and professionalism from her. She was one of the best analysts in her department, and colleagues respected her for her sharp mind and ability to find solutions in the most complex situations. But on that Friday spring night, something changed. Perhaps it was fatigue from endless reports, or maybe disappointment from another failed blind date arranged by her friends. Or simply the desire to feel alive after months of monotonous work. So Yeon walked along the waterfront, listening to the sound of the surf. A light breeze ruffled her long black hair, and moonlight reflected in her dark eyes. She took off her high heels and walked barefoot on the sand, enjoying the coolness under her feet. The sea always calmed her, helped her forget about problems and just be herself. That's when she saw him. A man stood at the very edge of the water, looking at the horizon. Tall, with broad shoulders, he seemed part of the night landscape. Something in his posture spoke of deep thoughtfulness, as if he was solving some important life dilemma. So Yeon slowed her pace, not wanting to disturb his solitude, but then he turned around. Their eyes met, and So Yeon felt something turn over inside her. He had a beautiful masculine face with regular features, but what struck her most were his eyes, dark, deep, full of some unspoken sadness and at the same time attractive power. "Sorry," he said, approaching closer. "I didn't mean to frighten you. I just couldn't sleep." His voice was low, slightly hoarse, with a barely noticeable accent. So Yeon realized he wasn't local. "It's all right," she replied, surprised by her own boldness. "I can't sleep either. The sea helps with thinking." He smiled, and this smile transformed his face, made it younger and more approachable. "My name is—" He hesitated for a second. "You can just call me Hyuk." "So Yeon," she introduced herself. They talked like old acquaintances. He told her that he had come to the city on business and tomorrow had to make an important decision that would change his life. She shared her thoughts about work, about how tired she was of the endless race for success. Hours flew by unnoticed. They walked along the shore, talking about books, music, dreams. Hyuk turned out to be a surprisingly interesting conversationalist, educated, well-read, with a subtle sense of humor. But what struck So Yeon most was how attentively he listened to her, as if every word she said was important to him. When the first rays of dawn painted the sky in pink tones, that special tension arose between them that cannot be explained in words. Hyuk stopped and turned to face her. "So Yeon," he said quietly, "I know we just met, but I feel there's something special between us." Her heart beat faster. Reason told her it was madness to let a stranger get so close to her. But her body didn't listen to reason. "I feel it too," she whispered. He gently touched her face with his palm, and So Yeon closed her eyes, pressing her cheek against his hand. And then he kissed her, and the whole world disappeared. This kiss was unlike anything she had experienced before. It contained everything: tenderness and passion, question and answer, promise and confession. When they broke apart, So Yeon understood that she could no longer just walk away. "Come to my place," she said, surprised by her own boldness. Her apartment was only a 10-minute walk from the waterfront. All the way they walked in silence, but their hands were intertwined, and electric tension of anticipation hung in the air. So Yeon lived in a modern building on the 13th floor. The apartment was small but cozy. She had furnished it with taste, choosing every detail with special care. This was her refuge from the outside world, a place where she could be herself. "Want some coffee?" she asked, turning on the light, suddenly feeling embarrassed. So Yeon, Hyuk approached her from behind and hugged her waist. "I don't need coffee." She turned in his embrace, and again their lips met. This time the kiss was more passionate, demanding. His hands glided along her back, and she felt herself melting under his touch. They made it to the bedroom, shedding clothes along the way. Hayek was tender and passionate at the same time, as if studying every curve of her body, memorizing every sigh. So Yeon had never thought she could feel so liberated with a man she had known for only a few hours. Their intimacy was intense and emotional. He whispered something to her in Korean, and although she didn't understand the words, the meaning was clear. In his touches she could read admiration, in his kisses, a hunger that was impossible to satisfy. When it was all over, they lay embracing, unable to let go of each other. Hayek stroked her hair, and So Yeon listened to the beating of his heart. "That was incredible," she whispered. "Yes," he agreed. "I've never felt anything like it." They talked until morning, sharing their most intimate thoughts. Hayek told her about his childhood and soul, about his difficult relationship with his father, about how hard it was for him to make serious decisions. So Yeon shared her dreams of starting her own business, her fear of never finding true love. "What if this is fate?" he asked when dawn had completely broken outside the window. "Do you believe in fate?" So Yeon was surprised. "Until this night, no. But now." He kissed her forehead. "Now I'm ready to believe in anything." In the morning Hayek was getting ready to leave, and So Yeon felt her heart squeeze. She understood that this was just a chance encounter, a fleeting attraction, but she didn't want to part at all. "Will we see each other again?" she asked, trying not to show how important this was to her. "Definitely," he promised, but she heard a note of uncertainty in his voice. I can't tell you everything right now, but believe me, this night means a lot to me." He kissed her goodbye, long and tenderly, as if trying to memorize the taste of her lips. "Until we meet again, So Yeon," he said at the door. "Until we meet again, Hayek." When the door closed behind him, the apartment seemed empty and cold to So Yeon. She pressed the pillow that still held his scent to her chest and realized she had fallen in love. Fallen in love with a man about whom she knew practically nothing, but who had turned her world upside down in one night. The following days passed as if in a fog. So Yeon tried to concentrate on work, but her thoughts constantly returned to that night. She replayed every word he said, every touch, every glance in her head 100 times. Colleagues noticed her distraction. Her best friend Min-ji even asked directly, "So Yeon, what's wrong with you? You're glowing from within, but at the same time you look like you've lost something very important." "Everything's fine," So Yeon replied, but she understood that she wasn't very convincing. Hayek didn't call or write. They didn't even have a way to contact each other, they hadn't exchanged phone numbers, and she only knew his first name. So Yeon went to the waterfront every evening hoping to meet him again, but he didn't appear. By midweek she began to doubt what had happened between them. Maybe she had imagined it all? Maybe for him it was just a casual affair, meaning nothing? Work also brought surprises. On Monday morning, Department Director Park Jin-soo gathered all employees and announced, "We have a new general director. Mr. Lee sold the company to a large South Korean conglomerate, and now we will be managed by their representative. They say he's very young and very demanding." A meeting with the new leadership is scheduled for Friday. So Yeon received this news without much enthusiasm. Change of leadership usually meant layoffs, reshuffling, changes in work processes. And right now she didn't want any extra stress. "I hope the new boss will be adequate," Min-ji muttered. "Remember what a nightmare it was with the previous interim manager?" "We'll see," So Yeon replied absent-mindedly. On Thursday evening she went to the waterfront again. This had become her ritual. Every day at the same time she came to the place where they had met and stood there, looking at the sea. She understood it was foolish, but couldn't stop herself. The sea was restless, waves crashed against the shore with special force. The spring wind was cool, and So Yeon shivered, pulling her jacket tighter. She stood there for half an hour, but Hayek never appeared. At home she couldn't fall asleep for a long time. Tomorrow was the meeting with the new director, and she didn't feel in the best shape. Her thoughts were confused, emotions overflowing. She tried to do yoga, took a hot bath, but nothing helped. I need to pull myself together, she thought, lying in the darkness. Tomorrow is an important day. New boss, possibly new opportunities. And Hayek. Maybe it's for the best that he disappeared. I wasn't looking for a serious relationship, right? But her heart ached, and no rational arguments could change that. Friday morning began with So Yeon oversleeping. The alarm didn't go off, or maybe she just didn't hear it. Waking up, she saw with horror that it was 9:15 on the clock. There was only an hour and a half left until the meeting with the new director, and she needed to get herself ready, get to the office, and prepare a presentation on recent projects. She jumped out of bed, quickly showered and put on her best business suit, dark blue, flattering her figure, but strict and elegant at the same time. The office atmosphere was nervous. Employees whispered among themselves, making assumptions about the new manager. Someone heard that he was very young for such a position. Someone said he came from the head office in Seoul and had a reputation as a tough manager. So Yeon, are you ready? Min-ji asked, approaching her desk. General meeting in half an hour. Yes, everything's ready, So Yeon replied, checking her documents one last time. The conference room on the 20th floor was full. All department employees had gathered to meet the new manager. So Yeon sat in the third row, trying to take an inconspicuous place. She always preferred to observe rather than attract attention. At 10 o'clock sharp, Park Jin-soo entered the hall accompanied by a man in an expensive dark suit. So Yeon's breath caught. Even from behind she recognized this figure, this walk, this shoulder turn. No, she thought frantically, this can't be true. It's a coincidence. Just looks similar. But when the new director turned to face the hall, her head spun. It was him. Her Hayek. Only now he looked completely different, fit, serious, clothed in an expensive suit and an aura of power. Allow me to introduce our new general director, Park Jin-soo said. Mr. John Eun Hayek, representative of the Korean conglomerate Jianhua Group. John Eun Hayek. That was his full name. So Yeon felt her hands trembling. She clasped them tightly together so no one would notice. Eun Hayek began speaking, introducing himself to the staff. His voice was the same, low, slightly hoarse, but now it carried notes of authority and confidence. He talked about the company's development plans, new projects, saying he counted on the professionalism of all employees. So Yeon listened but didn't hear. Her mind refused to accept what was happening. How was this possible? The man with whom she had spent the most passionate night of her life turned out to be her new boss. This was too incredible to be true. And then their eyes met. Eun Hayek was saying something about corporate culture when his eyes slid across the hall and stopped on her. For a second he froze, losing the thread of his reasoning. So Yeon saw how his pupils dilated, how the muscles of his face tensed. But he quickly pulled himself together and continued the presentation, as if nothing had happened. Only occasionally his gaze returned to her, and each time So Yeon felt everything turn over inside. After the general meeting, Park Jin-soo announced, Mr. John wants to personally meet the leading specialists of the department. Han So Yeon, Kim Min-ji, Park Tae-ho, please stay. So Yeon felt her legs give way. She wasn't ready for a personal meeting. Didn't know what to say, how to behave. Should she pretend she didn't know him? Or would he himself mention what had been between them? The other employees dispersed, and only a few people remained in the hall. Eun Hayek approached each one, introduced himself, asked questions about work. So Yeon was last in line. When he approached her, time seemed to stop. They stood facing each other, and silence hung between them, full of unspoken words. Han So Yeon, first-class analyst, Min-ji introduced her, not suspecting what bomb she was laying. Very pleased to meet you, Miss Han, Eun Hayek said, extending his hand for a handshake. His voice was absolutely even, professional. Only So Yeon saw how his lips trembled when he pronounced her name. She shook his hand, trying not to tremble. His touch burned, memories flooded in a stream. But there were people around, and she had to play a role. Likewise, Mr. John, she replied, surprised at how steady her voice sounded. He asked her several questions about current projects, and she answered as professionally as possible, although a hurricane of emotions raged inside. When the introduction ended, she felt squeezed like a lemon. After lunch, the general director's secretary approached So Yeon's desk. "Miss Han, Mr. John wants to see you in his office in half an hour. You need to bring reports on the C-Star project." So Yeon's hands went cold. A personal meeting with Eun Hyuk was the last thing she wanted right now. But she couldn't refuse. She spent those 30 minutes organizing documents and trying to set herself up for a business mood. This is just a work meeting, she convinced herself. We're adults, we can behave professionally. The general director's office was on the 21st floor. So Yeon took the elevator up, holding a folder with reports in her hands. Her heart was beating so loudly it seemed audible throughout the office. She knocked on the door and heard a familiar voice, "Come in." Entering the new boss's office, she saw the man from that night by the sea, with whom she had spent the night, only now he was in an expensive suit and introduced himself as her new director, John Eun Hyuk. He sat at a large dark wood desk, studying some documents. When she entered, he raised his head, and their eyes met again. This time there were no witnesses, and the masks could be removed. "Please sit down," he said, pointing to the chair opposite the desk. So Yeon sat, trying to sit straight and look calm. She placed the folder on the desk and waited. For several minutes they were silent. Eun Hyuk looked at her, and dozens of conflicting emotions could be read in his eyes: surprise, joy, embarrassment, worry. "So this is who you really are," he finally said. "Han So Yeon, first-class analyst." "And you are John Eun Hyuk, general director," she replied, unable to hold back the irony. "Amusing coincidence, isn't it?" He leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. This gesture was familiar to her. He did this that night when he was nervous. "So Yeon, I understand how this looks, but how does this look?" She interrupted, unable to stand it. "It looks like you played me. Random meeting on the shore, romantic night, and then, surprise. You turn out to be my new boss." "It's not like that," he answered firmly. "I didn't know who you were. I swear." Sincerity sounded in his voice, but So Yeon wasn't ready to believe. "Then explain how such a thing is possible. You come to the city the day before your appointment and accidentally meet one of your future subordinates? It's too incredible." Eun Hyuk stood and approached the window, looking at the city below. "I came here not only as the new director," he said slowly. "I had a personal reason too." "What reason?" He turned to her, and So Yeon saw something in his eyes that made her heart clench. "I was looking for the daughter of a man who was once very dear to my father. They were business partners, but then a conflict occurred, and this man moved here. A few years later he died in a car accident, leaving his daughter an orphan." So Yeon frowned. Something in this story seemed familiar. "My father always regretted quarreling with his friend," Eun Hyuk continued. "Before his death, he asked me to find his daughter and give her what rightfully belongs to her. Part of the inheritance that her father didn't manage to receive." "And who is this daughter?" So Yeon asked, though her heart was already suggesting the answer. "Han So Yeon," he said quietly. "Daughter of Han Ji-hun." The world swayed before her eyes. Han Ji-hun was her father's name, who died when she was 18. She never really knew what he did, only that he worked in international trade and often traveled on business trips. This is impossible," she whispered. "I spent months searching," Eun Hyuk said, returning to the desk. "I only knew that you lived in this city and worked at a large company. But finding a specific person among hundreds of thousands of residents turned out to be not so easy. And you decided to kill two birds with one stone?" Head the branch and find me? No, he shook his head. The appointment came later. First I just came to look for you. And when I got the job offer here, I thought it was a sign of fate. So Yeon stood and began pacing around the office. There was too much information, and she couldn't digest it. Suppose I believe in this coincidence, she said. But why didn't you tell me immediately who you were? That night on the shore? Eun Hyuk lowered his head. Because I'm a coward, he admitted. I didn't know how to approach you. How to say, hi, I'm the son of the man who quarreled with your father, but now I want to give you money. It would have sounded crazy. And what, you decided to seduce me first and then tell the truth? No. He jumped up, approaching her. So Yeon, what happened between us has nothing to do with the inheritance. When I met you on the shore, I didn't plan anything like that. I just couldn't resist. Such sincerity sounded in his voice that So Yeon almost believed. Almost. I need time to think it all over, she said, heading for the door. So Yeon, wait. No, she stopped at the door without turning around. I need time. And let's agree right away, at work we're just boss and subordinate. Nothing more. All right, he agreed quietly. As you say. She left the office, leaving the folder with reports on the desk. Her legs carried her to the elevator automatically, her brain refused to work. Only when the elevator doors closed did she allow herself to lean against the wall and close her eyes. The next 2 weeks became a real test for So Yeon. Every day at the office turned into balancing on a thin line between professionalism and emotions she couldn't control. Eun Hyuk kept his word. At work he was exceptionally correct with her. He addressed her formally, gave assignments through other employees, avoided personal meetings. But sometimes So Yeon caught his gaze, and in those fleeting moments a spark of what had been between them that night passed between them. Colleagues noticed nothing, but Min Ji, as always, proved observant. So Yeon, what's happening? She asked on Wednesday at lunch. You've been acting strange since the new director appeared. Nothing's happening, So Yeon lied. Just getting used to new management. Min Ji squinted. It seems to me there's something between you two. He looks at you somehow. Specially. It seems to you, So Yeon cut her off, but everything inside compressed. She tried to concentrate on work, but constantly thought about Eun Hyuk's words. About the inheritance, about her father, about the fact that there had been some connection between their families. She remembered that her father often mentioned a business partner from Korea, but never told details. On the weekend, So Yeon decided to visit Aunt Min Ju, her father's sister, who was the only close relative she had left after her parents' death. The aunt lived in a small house on the outskirts of the city, surrounded by a garden she was proud of. When So Yeon came, she was just watering roses. So Yeon. She was delighted. What a surprise. Come in, I was just about to have tea. Over tea, So Yeon carefully brought up the conversation about her father. Aunt, do you remember Dad telling about some Korean partner? It seems they quarreled shortly before his death? Aunt Min Ju's face darkened. Why do you want to remember this, dear? Your father died 10 years ago. Just curious. I know little about his work. The aunt sighed, setting down her cup. Yes, there was such a person. John. Something starting with John. They created a trade route between Korea and our country together. Business was going well, they even became friends as families. But then something happened. What exactly? I don't know the details, dear. Your father didn't like to discuss work at home. I only remember that he was very upset when this Korean accused him of dishonesty. There was some problem with documents, with money. Ji-hun said he was framed, but couldn't prove anything. So Yeon frowned. This story didn't match what Eun Hyuk had told. And what happened to their business? It collapsed. Your father lost almost everything. We thought he could recover, but a year later that accident happened. The aunt wiped away tears that had appeared. Why are you asking about this, So Yeon? Just remembered, she lied. Returning home, So Yeon reflected on what she had heard. So Eun Hyok's father accused her father of dishonesty? Then why was Eun Hyok talking about an inheritance that supposedly belonged to her by right? On Monday morning, Eun Hyok called all leading specialists to a planning meeting. They discussed a new major project, creating a logistics center that was to become a transit point for Asian goods. The project is very important for our company, Eun Hyok said, standing at the board with a presentation. We plan to complete the preparatory phase by the end of the month. So Yeon listened with half an ear, more observing him himself. In the business environment he was completely different, composed, decisive, a charismatic leader. It was hard to believe that this man had once tenderly kissed her at dawn. After the meeting, when everyone had dispersed, Eun Hyok detained her. Miss Han, please stay. I need to discuss your participation in the project with you. When they were alone, he approached closer. So Yeon, I see that you're avoiding me. Maybe we can talk normally? Not as boss and subordinate, but as people who... Who what? She interrupted. Who slept together? That doesn't change anything in our work relationship. It wasn't just sex, and you know it, he said quietly. So Yeon felt everything trembling inside, but restrained herself. I made inquiries about our fathers, she said. Your father accused mine of fraud. It was because of this that their business collapsed, and my father lost everything. So what inheritance were you going to give me? Eun Hyok paled. Who told you this? It doesn't matter. What matters is that you lied to me. He turned away, approaching the window. I didn't lie. I just didn't tell the whole truth. And what's the difference? The difference is that years later it turned out, my father was wrong, he said without turning around. Your father was indeed framed, but he didn't do it himself. They had a mutual partner who deceived both of them. When the truth came out, your father was already dead, and my father. He couldn't forgive himself for the unjust accusation. So Yeon was speechless. That's why he left instructions in his will to find you and give you the share of profits from that project that your father should have received, Eun Hyok continued. This isn't charity, but justice. Why didn't you tell me this immediately? He turned to her, and she saw pain in his eyes. Because I was ashamed. Ashamed that my family destroyed your father's life. Because I didn't know how to look you in the eyes and say, my father ruined yours, here's money as an apology. The silence stretched. So Yeon tried to digest what she had heard. And that night? She finally asked. What was it for you? The best night of my life, he answered without hesitation. And the most difficult at the same time. Because I fell in love with you, not knowing how to confess who I was. Fell in love? She looked at him with disbelief. Yes. At first sight on the seashore. And every day, seeing you here, I fall in love more and more. Even when you look at me with such distrust. So Yeon's heart was beating like crazy, but reason demanded caution. I need time, she repeated. All right, he nodded. But no, the inheritance offer isn't connected to my feelings. You have a right to that money regardless of what's happening between us. A few days later, Eun Hyok announced a corporate trip to a seaside resort. 2 days of teamwork and project planning in an informal setting. This will help the team get to know each other better and work more effectively, he explained at the general meeting. So Yeon wanted to refuse, citing illness, but Min-ji wouldn't let her. Don't make things up. This is a great opportunity to show yourself to the new management. Besides, the resort is amazing. I was there last year. The trip was planned for the weekend. The company rented a small hotel on the coast, where work sessions and corporate events were to take place. On Friday evening, the bus with employees departed for the sea. So Yeon sat at the very back, hoping to remain unnoticed, but Eun Hyuk periodically looked in her direction. Every time their eyes met, her breath caught. The hotel turned out to be really beautiful, small, cozy, with a sea view. So Yeon was placed in one wing with other girls from the department, and management was located in the opposite wing. The first day was spent working. They conducted brainstorming sessions, planned project stages, discussed the budget. Eun Hyuk was an excellent leader. He knew how to listen, make decisions, motivate the team. So Yeon involuntarily admired his professionalism. In the evening they organized a barbecue on the beach. Colleagues relaxed, some played volleyball, some just sat by the fire and chatted. So Yeon kept to herself, watching the general merriment. "Don't you want to join?" She heard a familiar voice. Eun Hyuk approached unnoticed, holding 2 cups of tea in his hands. "Thank you," she said, accepting the cup. They stood apart from the main group, listening to the sound of the surf and colleagues' laughter. "Remember, we also stood like this on the shore," he said quietly. "We shouldn't talk about that," So Yeon replied. "Why?" "Those were the best hours of my life." "Because it was based on lies." "Not on lies," he objected. "On things left unsaid." "But the feelings were real." So Yeon turned to him. "How can I know what's real? You hid from me who you were. Maybe you're hiding something else. Do you want me to tell you everything?" He offered. "Right now. The whole truth about myself, about our fathers, about what I feel for you." She hesitated. Part of her wanted to hear the truth, another part feared new disappointments. "All right," she finally agreed. "But not here." They walked further along the beach, away from the corporate party noise. They sat on the sand, looking at the moon reflected in the sea. "My name is John Eun Hyuk. I'm 30 years old," he began. "I'm the only son of John Tae-joon, owner of the Jianhua Group conglomerate. Until this year I worked as Deputy Director of Development at the head office in Seoul." So Yeon listened without interrupting. "My father was a tough businessman, but fair. When he realized he was wrong about your father, it broke him. He spent the last years of his life trying to find a way to correct the injustice. And what did he find? Documents proving Han Ji-hun's innocence. Records of conversations with the real fraudster. Testimonies from people who knew the truth but were afraid to speak. When all this surfaced, it became clear that your father was a victim of a complex scheme." Eun Hyuk fell silent, gathering his thoughts. "After my father's death I found his will. It contained instructions to find Han Ji-hun's daughter and give her $1 million, her share of the project, plus interest for all these years." "$1 million?" So Yeon gasped. "Yes. Plus official apologies on behalf of the John family." She was silent, digesting the information. "I spent months searching for you," he continued. "I only knew that you lived in this city. When I came here, I planned to act officially, through lawyers, banks. But that night on the shore, everything changed." "How?" "I fell in love. For the first time in my life I truly fell in love. And I realized I couldn't just approach and say, 'Hi, I owe you money for my father's guilt.' It would have sounded terrible." So Yeon turned to him. "And the director appointment?" "Came later. When management learned I was in this city, they offered to head the local branch. I agreed, thinking it would help me find a way to get closer to you." "And how did you plan to do that?" "Honestly, I don't know. Every day I came up with and discarded dozens of plans. And then fate decided for me. You turned out to be my subordinate." They sat in silence, listening to the sound of waves. So Yeon felt different emotions fighting inside: gratitude, anger, distrust, and something else she was afraid to name. "That night," she began, "was the most beautiful of my life," he finished. "And I don't regret anything. Even if you hate me." "I don't hate you," she said quietly. I just don't know what to feel. He turned to her, and in the moonlight his face seemed especially beautiful. You can feel anything. Be angry, offended, not trust. That's understandable. But no, my feelings for you are real. And the inheritance, this isn't an attempt to buy your love. This is a debt of honor. So Yeon looked at him, and her heart said one thing, and her mind, another. I need to go back, she said, standing up. They'll miss me. Of course, he agreed. They walked back in silence, but now this silence was different, not strained, but thoughtful. The next day work sessions continued, but it was hard for So Yeon to concentrate. Eun Hyok's words spun in her head. $1 million was a huge sum that could change her life. But what worried her even more was the confession of love. During the lunch break she walked around the hotel grounds, thinking about everything she had heard. Suddenly her phone rang. Aunt Minju was calling. So Yeon, dear, I remembered something, she said excitedly. After our conversation I was going through your father's old things and found his diary. Diary? Yes, he kept records in the last months of his life. There are details about that conflict with the Korean partner. Do you want me to read them? So Yeon sat on a bench in the hotel garden. Yes, please. March 15th, the aunt read. John Tae-jun accused me of forging documents. I'm in shock. We were friends, and now he thinks I'm a fraudster. I tried to explain that Kim Sun-ho, our third partner, substituted the papers, but Tae-jun doesn't believe. Our friendship is destroyed. So Yeon listened, feeling her heart squeeze. March 20th, the aunt continued. Found proof of innocence, but Tae-jun has already broken all contracts and left for Korea. Kim Sun-ho disappeared with all the money. I'm ruined, but the main thing, I lost a friend. April 1st. Tae-jun sent a letter through lawyers. He demands compensation for losses. He doesn't understand that I'm the same victim. I want to explain to him, but he doesn't answer calls. The aunt fell silent. Is that all? So Yeon asked. No, there's one more entry. May 10th. I learned that Tae-jun had a son. I want to congratulate him, despite everything. Maybe someday our children will be able to correct our mistakes. So Yeon felt a lump rise in her throat. And the last entry is from May 15th. The aunt was already speaking with tears in her voice. If something happens to me, let my daughter know, I loved her more than life. And let her forgive old grievances. Enmity between families is not her problem. The phone fell from So Yeon's hands. She sat in the hotel garden and cried, understanding how deeply she had been mistaken. Her father held no grudge against the John family. On the contrary, he dreamed of reconciliation. So Yeon? She heard a worried voice. Eun Hyok stood next to the bench, looking at her with concern. What happened? She picked up the phone, wiped away tears. Aunt, I'll call you back, she said and hung up. So Yeon, are you all right? Eun Hyok sat next to her. She told him about the aunt's call, about the entries in her father's diary. He listened silently, and she saw how his face changed. My father didn't hate yours, she finished. He dreamed of reconciliation. Like my father, Eun Hyok said quietly. In his last years he only talked about that. About how unfairly he had treated his friend. They sat next to each other, each absorbed in their own thoughts. You know what's most terrible? So Yeon said. We spent so much time on distrust and grievances, while our fathers wanted peace. It's not too late to fix this, Eun Hyok replied. She looked at him. What do you mean? Accept the inheritance. Forgive the past. Start over. He took her hand. Not as offender and victim, but as two people who can create something good from a bad story. So Yeon didn't pull her hand away. His touch was warm and calming. And what will happen with us? she asked. With our relationship? What do you want to happen? She was silent for a long time, looking at their intertwined fingers. I want to trust you, she finally admitted. But I'm afraid of making another mistake. Then give me a chance to prove that I'm worthy of trust, he asked. Not as director to subordinate, but as a man to the woman he loves. Returning from the corporate trip became a turning point in So Yeon and Eun Hyok's relationship. She didn't give him a final answer, but the atmosphere between them changed. The tension disappeared, understanding appeared. On Monday morning, Eun Hyok asked her to stay after the planning meeting. So Yeon, I want to show you the inheritance documents, he said, taking a thick folder from the safe. So you can see, everything is official, legal, without tricks. She studied the papers, his father's will, bank certificates, documents about the inheritance amount. Everything looked serious and real. This really is a lot of money, she said. Your father earned it. Eun Hyok sat opposite. But there's one condition. So Yeon frowned. What condition? A condition set by my father in the will. The money must be transferred personally, with apologies from a representative of the Jeon family. A formal procedure through lawyers won't work. And what does this mean? It means I must officially apologize on behalf of my family for the injustice caused to your father. So Yeon looked at him with surprise. But it's not your fault. You were a child when it all happened. It doesn't matter. This is our family's debt of honor. He stood and, to her amazement, bowed. Han So Yeon, on behalf of the Jeon family, I asked forgiveness for the injustice caused to your father Han Ji-hun. We acknowledge our mistake and hope this inheritance will partially atone for the harm done. So Yeon felt her throat tighten. There was so much sincerity and dignity in this bow that she couldn't help but believe. Please stand up, she said quietly. Please. He straightened, looking into her eyes. I accept the apology, she said. And the inheritance too. But with one condition. What condition? I want part of this money to go to charity. For scholarships for orphan children who lost their parents in accidents. As a memory of our fathers. Eun Hyok smiled. For the first time since their acquaintance, his smile was completely open and happy. Wonderful idea. My father would be proud. Over the next few days, the inheritance paperwork progressed quickly. Eun Hyok connected the best lawyers, and soon all documents were ready. So Yeon officially became the owner of $1 million, a sum that exceeded her wildest dreams. But what worried her even more was her relationship with Eun Hyok. He continued to behave correctly at work, but sometimes she caught his gaze, full of tenderness and adoration. And every time her heart stopped. On Friday evening he approached her desk when most employees had already left. So Yeon, would you like to have dinner with me? He asked. To celebrate the completion of the inheritance formalities. She hesitated for only a second. All right. He took her to a small restaurant on the waterfront, not too expensive, but cozy, with a sea view. They sat at a table by the window, and So Yeon involuntarily remembered that night when it all began. Beautiful place, she said, looking at the setting sun painting the water in golden tones. I specially chose it, Eun Hyok admitted. I wanted us to have good memories connected with the sea. Dinner passed in pleasant conversation. They talked about work, future plans, art, and literature. So Yeon discovered new facets in Eun Hyok. He turned out to be not only a successful businessman, but also a subtly feeling person with broad horizons. You know, she said when they ordered dessert, I was thinking about what I told you at the corporate event. About being afraid of making another mistake. And what conclusion did you reach? That mistakes are part of life. And if you're always afraid of them, you can miss something really important. Eun Hyok placed his hand on the table, palm up, an invitation, not coercion. So Yeon looked at his hand, then into his eyes and slowly intertwined their fingers. I'm ready to try, she said quietly. But I have conditions. I'm listening. No secrets. If there's going to be something between us, then only on the basis of complete honesty. Agreed. And no mixing personal with professional. At work we're colleagues, at home, whatever happens. Understood. Any more conditions? So Yeon smiled. Not yet. But I reserve the right to add them. Fair, he laughed. Can I also set a condition? What? Give me the opportunity to prove that I can make you happy. Their eyes met, and in his eyes So Yeon saw the same tenderness and passion as that first night. But now openness and hope were added to them. All right, she whispered. Let's try. After dinner they walked along the waterfront, holding hands. It was still early, and there were many people on the beach, but it seemed to them they were alone in the whole world. Tell me honestly, So Yeon asked, do you regret coming here? After all, your life and soul was calmer. I don't regret anything, he replied. If I hadn't come, I would never have met you. And meeting you is the best thing that's happened in my life. Even considering all the complications? Especially considering them. Easy victories quickly become boring. And you. You make me fight for every smile, for every trusting word. And that makes everything 1,000 times more valuable. They stopped at the very place where they had first met. The moon reflected in the water exactly as it had then. Do you remember what you told me that night? So Yeon asked. About fate. I remember. I said that until meeting you I didn't believe in it. And now? Eun Hyuk turned to her, took her face in his palms. Now I believe that some meetings are destined by heaven. And ours is one of them. He kissed her, and this kiss was even more tender and deep than that first one. It didn't contain the desperation of night passion, only pure, bright love and a promise of the future. The following weeks flew by like a fairy tale. So Yeon and Eun Hyuk carefully built their relationship, learning to trust each other and open up. At work they remained strictly professional, but after work they turned into an ordinary couple in love. Eun Hyuk turned out to be a caring and attentive partner. He remembered all her preferences, surprised her with small gifts, supported her in difficult moments. So Yeon blossomed under his attention, became more open and cheerful. One evening, when they were having dinner at her place, Eun Hyuk said, So Yeon, I'm thinking about resigning. She choked on her tea. What? Why? Because I want to do my own business. And because our work relationship is starting to interfere with our personal one. But you're an excellent director. The company is thriving under your leadership. Thank you. But I have a better idea. He leaned toward her. Do you want to become my business partner? In what sense? I'm thinking about creating a new type of logistics company. Environmentally clean, socially responsible. Your analytical abilities plus my management experience plus your inheritance as startup capital, we could create something revolutionary. So Yeon thought. The idea of starting her own business had always attracted her, but she had never dared take such a step. And if it doesn't work out? It will work out, he said confidently. We have everything necessary, knowledge, experience, finances, and, most importantly, a shared vision. And what kind of company will this be? Eun Hyuk took out a tablet and showed her a presentation he had apparently been preparing for a long time. Logistics with minimal carbon footprint. Use of electric transport, route optimization using AI, recycling of packaging materials. Plus a social program, employment for people with disabilities, scholarships for students. So Yeon looked at the schemes and graphs, and her eyes lit up brighter and brighter. This is ambitious, she said. But honest. We'll create a business our fathers would be proud of. And our relationship? How will we separate personal and business? We won't, he smiled. We'll be honest partners in everything. And if you agree to become not only a business partner. He took a small box from his pocket. So Yeon's breath caught. Eun Hyak. Han So Yeon, he said, dropping to one knee, will you marry me? Will you become my partner in business and in life? In the box lay a simple but beautiful ring with a diamond. But we've only known each other a few months. Sometimes a few minutes is enough to understand, this person is your destiny. And we've had months to confirm the correctness of our first impression. So Yeon looked at him, at the ring, and her heart suggested the answer. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. He put the ring on her finger and kissed her. And this kiss was everything: love, promise, gratitude to fate for the given meeting. A few days after the engagement, Eun Hyak invited So Yeon to a special dinner. He prepared the food himself, set the table with candles, created a romantic atmosphere. What are we celebrating? She asked. I want to tell you another story, he said. The final part of our family saga. So Yeon became alert. More secrets? Not secrets. I just wanted to be sure of your feelings before telling you. He sat opposite her, took her hands in his. When my father realized his mistake regarding your father, he didn't just leave a will about the inheritance. He did something else. What? He gave up his share in that project they were working on together with your father. According to documents, the entire business should have belonged to Han Ji-hun. So Yeon looked at him uncomprehendingly. But father died not knowing about this. Yes. And formally his share passed to you. So Yeon, you're not just the heir to $1 million. You're the owner of trade routes between Korea and our country. That very business that was destroyed by our father's quarrel. What? She couldn't believe what she heard. My father restored all documents, proved your father's right to these routes. Now they're yours. And I. He smiled. I renounced all claims to them in your favor. But why? Because it's fair. And because I want to build our shared future on an honest foundation. So Yeon was silent, trying to comprehend the scale of the opportunities that had opened up. So our new company is the revival of our father's business? Exactly. But now without conflicts, without distrust. With a clean slate. She stood and approached the window, looking at the city lights. This is too much, she said. Too perfect to be true. Eun Hyak approached her from behind, embraced her. Sometimes life gives us a chance to correct past mistakes. Our fathers couldn't preserve their friendship, but we can build love. And if we quarrel? If our business collapses like theirs? Then we'll learn from their mistakes. We'll be honest with each other, we'll trust, we'll remember that love is more important than money. She turned in his embrace. You really gave up all rights to the family business for me? Not for you. For us. For justice. And so that our children will never know what enmity between families is like. Children? She smiled. Are you already planning children? Aren't you? He kissed her forehead. Can you imagine how beautiful and smart they'll be? So Yeon laughed, for the first time in a long time, so easily and sincerely. You know what? She said. I think our fathers, somewhere up there, are very pleased. I'm sure they're pleased. We fulfilled their dream of reconciliation. So Yeon and Eun Hyak's wedding was modest but very warm. They registered at a small wedding palace on the seashore, in the very place where they first met. Only the closest people attended the ceremony: Aunt Min Ju, best friend Min Ji, several colleagues, and the groom's friends from Korea. Instead of a lavish banquet, they organized a picnic on the beach. Everyone sat on blankets, ate simple but delicious food, laughed and told stories. When the sun began to set, the newlyweds walked away to the water's edge. Do you remember, I told you about fate? Eun Hyak asked, embracing his wife. I remember. Then you still didn't believe in it. And now I believe unconditionally. All coincidences, all accidents led us to each other. Your insomnia that night, my walk along the shore, even the job offer, all this was predestined. Maybe, So Yeon agreed. But the main thing isn't fate, but that we chose each other. A month after the wedding, they filed documents to register a new company. They called it C-Star, in honor of that project where it all began for their fathers. The first months were difficult. They needed to establish connections, find clients, solve 1,000 organizational issues. But they worked as a single team, complementing each other. So Yeon was responsible for analytics and strategic planning, Eun Hyuk for operational management and external relations. Their first major contract was transporting environmentally clean goods from Korea, exactly the route their fathers had once developed. You know what I like most about our business? So Yeon asked one evening when they were working at home on another project. What? That we're not just making money. We're creating something useful, honest. Something to be proud of. That's real success, Eun Hyuk agreed. When work brings not only profit, but also satisfaction. By the end of the first year of work, C-Star already had regular clients and stable profit. They opened a charitable foundation named after Han Ji-hun and John Tae-jun, which helped orphaned children get education. Exactly a year after their first meeting, So Yeon and Eun Hyuk were again walking along the waterfront. Only now So Yeon was pregnant, and her rounded belly bravely fought the winds. Aren't you cold? Eun Hyuk asked caringly, adjusting her jacket. No, everything's wonderful. I wanted to come here today specifically, on the anniversary. They reached the place where once two strangers had stood, each with their own problems and doubts. If someone had told me a year ago what would happen, So Yeon said, I wouldn't have believed it. But I would have believed, Eun Hyuk replied. The moment I saw you, I felt my life would change forever. And you weren't wrong. They stood embracing, listening to the sound of the surf. The moon shone as brightly as a year ago, but everything else had changed. Now they had no secrets, no distrust, only love, shared plans and confidence in tomorrow. What do you think, boy or girl? So Yeon asked, stroking her belly. It doesn't matter. The main thing is for the baby to be healthy and happy. And to know the story of their grandfathers. To understand that even from the most difficult situations you can find a way out if you don't lose hope and faith in good. We'll definitely tell them. And about how their children were able to turn family enmity into family happiness. The baby kicked in her belly, as if agreeing with the parents. He hears us, So Yeon laughed. Of course he hears. And I hope he remembers. Let him know from birth that his parents love each other madly. They kissed, and in this kiss was their entire story, from the first meeting on the shore to today. Passion had turned into deep tenderness, doubts into confidence, and a chance encounter into a strong family. When they left the beach, So Yeon looked back. Thank you, she whispered to the sea. For what? Eun Hyuk asked. For everything. For bringing us together. For giving us a chance. For the fact that our children will grow up in peace, not in enmity. They walked home holding hands, and ahead of them waited a life full of love, work that brings joy, and children who would be proud of their parents.